Hello. Thank you for stopping past the My Reader Minutes. I do have a couple of updates for you regarding Diddy. Not going to be here long, but let's get into it. Shall we? Welcome back. So today I mentioned that I want to talk about Diddy. It's been a couple of updates that have been filed from the government, the prosecution side, and also Diddy's legal team. But first, I just want to say everything on my channel is alleged and, in my opinion, and done for entertainment purposes only. I am by no means a lawyer in the legal field whatsoever, and these are my opinions. Okay? Now let's get started. Well, first I just want to say, I've made other videos in the past about Diddy, and I've been accused of taking up for Diddy, like I'm on Diddy's side and that I am for Diddy and hoping that he, I guess, gets off or whatever. Let me first start off by saying that is not the case. I just want him to get a fair trial. The reason I want him to have a fair trial is because if everything is done to the letter of the law, there's no room for his legal team to come back and say that he wasn't given the opportunity to do this. His constitutional rights were violated. And then it also prevents any mistrials, cases getting thrown out, what have you. Him getting out on bail, if everything is done the right way. Well, y'all remember the whole sweep ordeal that Diddy's legal team and the government have been going back and forth on. Okay, evidently there was a sweep of MDC, and Diddy's cell, the prosecution is denying everything, of course, but Diddy's legal team is saying Diddy's cell was targeted. We don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there. All I know is what has been presented to the courts, right? What has been presented to the courts. So Diddy's legal team wants a hearing, okay? Because evidently, and just to give you a little bit of background, and then those of you who've been following know this already, when they did a sweep, they took pictures of Diddy's notes that he wrote to himself, to his lawyers, or, they want to have a hearing on this to make sure that the attorney-client privilege was not violated by them taking pictures of the notes, because everything they took pictures of, they sent over to the prosecution, whoever swept his cell, right? So there's been some letters. I think the government on January 17th attached some declarations in response to the court order on January 3rd in further support of its opposition to the defendant's motion for a hearing. Okay. They said, at the request, let me just share my screen real quick so y'all can see what I'm reading, because I'm not making this up. See, as of January the 17th, this is the prosecution sending this to the judge. And this is, at the request of the Bureau of Prisons, the government respectfully seeks to file the declaration attached as Exhibit B under seal. Based on communication with counsel from BOP, the government understands that the information contained Therein reveals sensitive law enforcement techniques and reveals the identity of an employee involved in an ongoing BOP-led investigation. Finally, with respect to Exhibit A, the prosecution team declaration, the government provides information requested by the court, but is doing so does not waive any applicable privilege, including law enforcement privilege and deliberative process privilege. I don't know what that means. Okay. So the government remains available to answer any further questions of the court. Okay, so Exhibit A. Okay, so it says, I have been an assistant United States attorney. This is Christy Slavic. Okay, she's talking about her credentials. Says this affidavit is based upon my personal knowledge as well as my review of relevant communications and my conversations with other members of the prosecution team and supervisors from the USAO Southern District, New York, where the contents of statements and conversations of others are reported herein. They are reported in substance and in part, except where otherwise indicated. So BOP is monitoring the defendant's communication in custody. Okay, they talk about MDC, non-apparent attempts to circumvent monitoring, as well as the use of coded language and possible attempts to engage in witness intimidation. These are things that they were saying that they found. On October 13th, 2024, I spoke with investigator one who provided an overview of some of the defendant calls that he had monitored. So they're talking about how they were monitoring his phone calls, how they had found out that he was using other people's minutes, how he was using three-way calling, getting other people to call for them, getting his attorneys to call other people for them, and trying to intimidate witnesses. This is what all this is saying. So the planning for this MDC sweep, this AUSA Slavic, she said, based on, or he said, no, she's Christy, based on my discussions with other people, unit chief who does not supervise the prosecution team or otherwise have involvement in the defendant's prosecution. I have learned that beginning in or around June and July 2024, the BOP and the United States Department of Justice Office of Inspector General began planning a large-scale search of MDCs for contraband. The BOP and DOJ OIG were responsible for the execution of the MDC sweeps, hosted a series of status calls with participating federal agencies as well as representatives from blah, 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 blah. Okay, so they're saying that these sweeps were already scheduled prior to Diddy even being detained in the facility. They're saying as of June or July of last year, they had already talked about or planning a sweep of the jail. Diddy didn't get detained in this jail until September. Okay, so they're saying he was not targeted because these things were already in motion. Okay, all right, that's fine. Based on my conversation with members of the prosecution team, I have learned that no member of the prosecution was involved in the planning of the MD sweep, further as described in paragraph blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the MD sweep, October 28th, 2024 through November 1st. Based on my review of the email communications, I learned that on or about October 28th and the other federal agencies began executing the planned MDC sweep. That day after the MDC sweep was already in progress, members of the prosecution team learned of the MDC sweep when Supervisor 2 sent an email to all assistant U.S. attorneys in the criminal division in the Southern District. Okay, it was an office-wide email. It informed all of the AUSAs that it was pre-planned large-scale search of MDC in response to persistent contraband issues at MDC. And further, stated that the MDC sweep was not the result of any specific intelligence or threat. I also understand that the office-wide email that it was expected that contraband narcotics, weapons, and electronic devices could be seized. Defendants during the MDC sweep and the A's may be contacted about contraband seized from defendants in their assigned cases. Based on my conversations with Supervisor 2, who, as described above, is not part of the prosecution team, but had a role coordinating with these responsible for planning the MDC sweep, I've learned that the MDC sweep continued through November 1st. Supervisor 2 was at the MDC on or about October 28th and on or about the morning of October 29th to ensure legal issues involving defendants were addressed to rely. Okay, so based on my review of the public reporting, I am aware that on October 28th, 24, various media outlets reported that there was an interagency operation, excuse me, at the NDCC where Sean Combs, the defendant, was housed. Okay, so based on my conversation with Supervisor 2, I have learned that on or about the morning of October 29th, 2024, following the completion of the first day. Okay, so it's a lot here. We're not going to spend all day on this because it's good. This is lengthy. So basically, they're just summing up that this was all in motion prior to Sean Diddy Combs being detained in the facility. Okay, so again, they were looking for contraband. Contraband consists of weapons, DRUGSs, alcohol, cell phones, electronics, tobacco products, money, or any type of currency that's not allowed within the facility, tools, and escape devices. That should be number one, right? Food and perishable items not purchased through the channels that they provide them with. Personal items beyond limits, like excessive quantities of allowable personal items or those not approved by the facility. So why are you taking pictures of his notes? Things written down. Why are you taking pictures of that? That's not considered contraband. I understand why the defense might want a hearing on this because they need the government to prove, was Diddy's cell unit or whatever they call it targeted. Let's move on. Okay, so based on my conversation with Supervisor 1 and 2, I've learned that no attorney in the Southern District personnel directed how the search of the Unit 1 would be conducted or whether any particular area or bunk within Unit 1 or any particular inmate possession should be searched. So they're saying they had nothing to do, the prosecution had nothing to do with how they searched Diddy's unit. However, if contraband, I'm sure this isn't the first sweep they've ever did for contraband. So they knew it looks suspicious. It does look suspicious. Why would you take pictures of his handwritten notes? I'm sure you read it about what he was going to do, who he was going to call, who he was going to, threaten or whatever. Whatever he had written down didn't necessarily mean he had to carry it out. So they coupled that with his phone calls that he was making that were three-way calls, using other people's minutes. Kind of looks suspicious. I'm just saying. Now, if the government can prove that that wasn't done in just, then then they might be able to get away with it. But I feel like this might give Diddy's legal team a win, and at the most, he will be let out on bail because They can't trust the people inside monitoring him because of this big foul up. They're not going to do it. And then on top of that, the government used what was provided to them. Why that was evidence that you used that as evidence of saying this is what we found, this is what's on the notes, he did this, he did that, he was going to do this, he's going to say that. You presented that as your evidence, if I'm not mistaken. Allegedly. I can't remember. But I want to say it was presented as if it was something that they, like, part of discovery that was found in the sweep. Why was that handed over? It's not contraband. You all were searching. The sweep was for contraband, whether it was planned in 2023, 220, January of 2024. Regardless, it was for contraband, not letters. Letters could have been, or notes to yourself, letters for home, letters to your lawyer, notes to, reminders to whatever we need to talk about to your lawyer. But it was actually, and I think they framed it as it was Diddy's strategy to intimidate witnesses. However, you got the information, you got a picture of it because you came back and showed that the pictures that we took, you were so into the fact that defense said that everything on those notes said legal. You were so into saying, well, this wasn't saying it was legal, that you really missed the whole point. You shouldn't have been taking pictures of that at all. It wasn't considered contraband. So why you got, so y'all see what I'm saying? Okay. So this is what I'm saying. This could be a turn in the case and a win for Diddy. This was my whole thing. If y'all not going to give him a fair trial, this is going to get thrown out. Or mistrial is going to have to happen. They're going to have to recruit new prosecution. And it's going to be subject to what they can use as evidence, because all that old evidence is going to have to be thrown out. They're going to have to just redo everything. That's like climbing to a top of a mountain millions of miles high and then falling back to the bottom. Like, what? Why are we doing this? Wasting our strength and time. So this attorney goes on and on about how she's talked over and over again to Supervisor 1, Supervisor 2, saying that, they didn't have anything to do with how the sweep was being done or how it was being run. They didn't have anything to do with it. This is what was planned. Blah, 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 blah. This was wasn't aimed at Diddy. He just got caught up because at the time that they did the sweep, he was already detained in the facility and his unit got searched along with others. But they're saying that it was he was not targeted. And I can believe that. I believe that he wasn't targeted for the sweep. However, the sweep made it convenient for them to get what they got to hand over to the prosecution. So maybe it wasn't premeditated. Like, we're going to do this sweep because we got to get into this cell. However, but they used that to get into the cell and to do what they needed to do. So anyway. Okay, so I'm just skimming through this. I'm not reading this word for word. If you want to look it up, there's the case number. You can pull it up yourself. You know what? Okay. So you can pull up yourself. So that's it. That's the end of that. So let's see. I think if there's nothing else. Okay. So with the government filing that, okay. The legal team for Diddy has also answered back. So they were writing on behalf, and this is what they want them to do. This is in response to the government's declarations or whatever, of them proving that they had nothing to do with the sweeps. The sweeps were pre-planned prior to Diddy going into jail. And then this is the letter back from Diddy's legal team. Now, this may take a little bit of time. We'll see how much time we got here. Okay, over. I don't want to really go over 45 minutes because this is long. So it says, Dear Judge Subramanian, sorry about that, no disrespect. We write on behalf of Sean Combs to respond to the declaration submitted by the government on January 17th, and in further support of Mr. Combs' motion for a hearing, suppression, and other relief. The declarations show that ever since the government first tried to use Mr. Combs' privilege notes to continue his detention, it was presented materially false narrative about how it got access to these sensitive privileged materials containing this defense strategy and communications with his attorneys. Most significantly, the declarations revealed that the Southern District of New York supervisors directed the BOP to search Mr. Combs' unit because of its investigation and prosecution of Mr. Combs. And they demonstrate that the government has consistently monitored Mr. Combs' legal calls. In other words, they confirm that Mr. Combs has been arguing all along that the search was conducted based upon a pretext, not for any legitimate penological reason, and that Investigator One's surveillance before and during the search violated Mr. Combs' constitutional rights and invaded the attorney-client privilege. First, the declarations refute the government's repeated claims that the BOP sweep was carried out solely to further legitimate penological interests and did not target Mr. Combs. The declarations exposed that after the sweep began, it was unclear whether Mr. Combs' unit would be searched at all. Moreover, the search of the unit was carried out specifically at the direction of the Southern District New York supervisors, including the supervisor for this case, because of their interest in obtaining evidence against Mr. Combs. Second, the declarations show that Investigator One became an agent of the prosecution team and worked to advance its case. He searched Mr. Combs' bunk for evidence, not contraband. And it is clear his purpose was to gather evidence for the prosecution, not police any potential threats to MDC security. Indeed, it is notable that even though he has been surveilling Mr. Combs' communication for months, to this day, the BOP has not taken any actions to discipline Mr. Combs for any purported violations of the MDC policies. Mr. Combs has never received so much as a write-up in his 4 months in BOP custody, despite the government's repeat complaints about his alleged obstruction from MDC and supposed violation of policy. Third, the declarations confirm that the government was complicit in Investigator One's continuous monitoring of Mr. Combs' privileged communication. Investigator One admits he listened to Mr. Combs' calls, including with his counsel, and that all those recordings, including the ones with attorneys, are being furnished to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Finally, the declarations raise additional questions that cannot fully and accurately be answered except through discovery and evidentiary hearing. As just one example, despite reporting to prosecutors that he personally took the photographs of Mr. Combs' notes, the declarations are inconsistent with each other, omit key details, rely extensively on hearsay, and are remarkably vague as to key points. The truth will only be fully revealed if the government's claims can be tested through cross-examination of witnesses who have actual knowledge of the material facts. Likewise, the court cannot fashion appropriate remedies without the complete information that can only be discovered through such a hearing. So they were adamant about getting this hearing to prove that the notes were obtained and it violated the attorney-client privilege, that Diddy's constitutional rights were violated. They are adamant about this being done. This could be the turning point for this case. Something like this. People so advantageous to get something to make it seem like, they've done something. Like, stay in your lane. You were doing sweeps for contraband. He didn't have no contraband that eluded any type of real threat to the MDC facility. So what were you taking pictures of? Shouldn't have went through his paperwork. Now, granted, all phone calls are monitored. So it's not like they didn't know that. If he's calling on the phone, regardless of who he talks to on three-way, other people's, all phone calls are recorded. So that shouldn't have been a surprise. And and then they listened to recordings of what he was saying, I guess that could be used against you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know all the rules and regulations. I'm assuming that's why they recorded. But going in his cell and not looking at anything other than what you were there for, contraband, weapons, DURGSs, alcohol, electronic devices, phone, stuff like that. You're taking pictures of his notes. Even if you read them, you knew that they were for his lawyers. And even if it was thoughts that he just wrote down, how is that contraband? Even if I said, you know what, I'm calling this person, I'm calling this person, I'm calling this person, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, I'm going to say this. That's just a piece of paper. This is where I think they did messed up. Honestly, I really do. And the judge, where he has been very, very cautious and smart, can feel that may not have been the right thing to do. That's why he's like, I need this. I need the government to supply this. I need the government, and then I need the defense to supply this. He's getting everybody, like, he's letting them do the work. Y'all are showing what y'all did. And now as soon as I present it back to you, you tell me where we need to go with this. So, number one, the defense team is saying the government's Number one, the government misrepresented the facts and tried to conceal the constitutional violations. We're not writing on this. Yes, we are. The declarations contradict the government's prior representations concerning the reason for the search and who directed it. The government previously claimed that the MDC sweep was planned by prison officials well in advance of Mr. Combs' arrest. Okay, was motivated solely by legitimate pinnacle interests and did not target Mr. Combs. Okay. It further claimed no one in the case team supervised, conducted, or participated, and that the search was organized and executed primarily by BOP staff. Okay. These claims were essential to the government's opposition, which rested on the motion that prison officials were presumed to do their best to evaluate and monitor objectively the security needs of the institution, including and in deciding whether a search is necessary. But Diddy's team is saying these claims were false. In truth, the truth is that the search of Mr. Combs Jr. apparently was not even part of BOP's original plan for the sweep. Well, they wouldn't have been because he wasn't there, right? Okay. But it was the Southern District New York supervisors, including the trial team's own unit chief, Supervisor 1, who ultimately directed the search. And the search was conducted not for legitimate institutional security reasons, but because Supervisor 1 was interested in searching Mr. Combs. Specifically, on the morning of the second day of the sweep, representatives from the BOP and other federal agencies met to discuss a potential search of Mr. Combs' unit. The agencies had not previously decided whether such a search was necessary and inquired into the position of USAO, okay, Southern District, New York, okay, regarding the potential search. Supervisor 2, a Southern District, New York unit chief who helped plan the MDC sweep and was present during the sweep, then discussed with Supervisor 1 whether Mr. Combs' unit should be searched. Supervisor 1 stated that it should be searched in part because of what the prosecution team had learned regarding Mr. Combs' conduct at MDC. Supervisor 1 conferred with his senior leadership and relayed to Supervisor 2 that Mr. Combs' unit should indeed be searched, which Supervisor 2 further relayed to the BOP, leading to the search. Thus, while AUSA Slavic claims that they weren't involved, right, that nobody directed them to search Mr. Combs' unit be conducted, she can't deny that the supervisors directed the search itself. That flatly contradicts the government's prior representations. So Investigator 1 was searching for evidence, not contraband. Okay, this is the other part. The declaration also contradicts the government's prior narrative concerning its relationship with Investigator 1 and his motivations. The government previously claimed that the case team investigation and the BOP investigation have operated independently. Investigator 1 merely searching for contraband, not evidence. During the sweep, the declarations show that both of these claims were false. In fact, the government and Investigator 1 worked in a coordination fashion for at least 2 weeks leading up to the MDC search, and the trial team encouraged Investigator 1 to monitor Mr. Combs' communication. BOP personnel contacted Supervisor 1 on October 10, 2024 to inform her that Investigator 1 was monitoring Mr. Combs' communication and found relevant evidence. That date is significant because it was 10 days after Mr. Combs filed his widely publicized notice of appeal concerning the detention order, and the same day the court invited the defense to make a renewed bail application. Notably, the Southern District New York supervisor on this case had been present for all court appearances in this matter, including the October 10th conference. And then they redacted this part right here. I guess it's revealing the name of the people all involved. So they say he spoke with AUSA Slavic on several other occasions in October and November. Slavic, although USA Slavic never specifies when or in what capacity these conversations took place or what was discussed. Investigator 1 clearly became an agent of the prosecution team. He collected, screened, and shared evidence while collaborating with a trial team prosecutor, and the fruits of his investigation were ultimately used by the government to try to detain Mr. Combs, which they were. They presented it to the judge as to why he should not get out. Because this is what he wrote down. This is who he was calling. This is what he said. This is what this is the strategy that he's worked out with the team. They're not lying. He made a point of alerting then to Mr. Combs' plan to discredit possible witnesses. I just said that. And find dirt on people. In other words, core defense strategy protected by the Sixth Amendment, unrelated to any legitimate penological concerns. And the prosecutors have used this information to obtain and illegally obtained in various ways. We cannot know the full extent of the improper use of the fruits of the search without a Castinger hearing, which is a hearing that would make the government prove that Diddy's constitutional rights weren't violated, that they obtained this evidence legally, and that the evidence has not been tainted. They got to prove it. Even though you can say, and I'm just using simple terms, someone's jaywalking, they're not using the crosswalk, right? Even though everybody can see that he didn't use the crosswalk and he's in the middle of the road, he's stopping traffic, causing accidents. Everybody can see that he did it. You have to prove in front of a court that at 3:00 p.m., Mr. Doe walked in traffic. You have to have pictures, video surveillance, maybe audio to prove that he was there at that time doing that thing illegally. And you have to present that to the court. Even though we know it's all wrong, it has to be presented. And that's what, in the reverse, is what the defense is requesting for the government to do. Y'all need to prove that y'all obtained this information legally, that Mr. Combs' rights were not violated, and that the evidence that you used was not tainted. And we want a hearing on it. And I don't think that they're going to get denied a hearing. The government's going to have to prove. Now, whether they can prove it or not, that's neither here nor there. And I hope they can. I do. I hope they can. But if they can't, and they were all working in cahoots together, I feel like I said, I don't believe that the sweeps were planned for Diddy, because like you said, they were planned back in June and July. No, Diddy wasn't even in the facility, so they couldn't have been planned in him in mind. However, they used the opportunity of the sweeps to search his unit and to look for evidence, because clearly there was no contraband in those pictures. Just attorney-client privilege notes. This is all my opinion, allegedly. Whatever I gotta say to not be sued. Okay. So then they said, clearly investigator one searched Mr. Combs' notes during the sweep to find evidence for the prosecutors. He was not searching for purported contraband, as the government previously represented to the court. Moreover, USA Slavic states that the BOP was looking for narcotics, weapons, and electronic devices, none of which was possibly be found in the pages of Mr. Combs' notes. The contraband excuse was thus clearly a pretext for the unlawful search. So then the government did not proceed in good faith and took no steps to avoid violating his rights. So the declaration confirms that the government has, via Investigator 1, consistently monitored Mr. Combs' privileged communications with his attorneys. In his opposition to the defense motion, the government claimed it made good faith efforts to avoid coming into contact with privileged material, and that it is contrary to fact and logic to support Investigator 1 was its informant in the defense camp. But it turns out Investigator 1 has been spying on the defense team all along. Investigator 1 thus repeatedly informed the trial team he was eavesdropping on privileged communications, but the trial team never instructed him to stop. That is outrageous. Worse, the trial team endorsed his conduct by requesting the communication at issue. Accordingly, the government has obtained and produced to the defense over 30 of the defense own calls with Mr. Combs, blah, 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 blah. This is an egregious breach of Mr. Combs' rights, and the court should immediately order the government and BOP to cease any such spying on the defense camp. So, the declaration showed that further discovery and a hearing are required. The Slavic declaration is permeated with unified hearsay and lacks of crucial detail. They said the declaration is largely based on unsworn hearsay. They want a trial on this. They want a hearing on it. The declaration further references without describing multiple conversations and meetings involving BOP personnel, certain, okay. Excuse me. Oh, stomach is growling. Sorry, y'all. And just one more example, the Slavic Declaration states Investigator 1 provided a high-level overview of the contents of the BOP notes, including the defendant's plan to discredit possible witnesses and find dirt on people. What specifically did Investigator 1 say? What witnesses were identified? And what else was communicated regarding the notes? Perhaps directing Investigator 1 to provide the photographs to the filter team in the first instance provided some cover for the case team, but if the high-level overview revealed the substance of the notes, it was not a legitimate way to ensure that the case team was not tainted by access to privileged information about There's defense. Declarations lack important detail. The prosecution team also includes Supervisor 1, Supervisor 2, and senior leadership. Okay, so this is their response back. The government should produce the emails and other evidence. Okay, instead of sharing the full story, the government has cherry-picked a few facts and submitted declarations that undermine the credibility of its previous submission, omit key facts, and raise numerous important questions about what really happened. A full hearing in which Mr. Combs' counsel are afforded the opportunity to cross-examine the government actors with knowledge of the facts relevant to the search is the only way to find the true facts and understand the full picture so the court can assess how best to remedy this grave violation of Mr. Combs' constitutional rights. Mr. Combs therefore respectfully requests the court order the government to produce the additional discovery described in this letter, as well as whatever communications it has already shared with the court in camera, and hold a hearing. So, yeah. What y'all think? What do y'all think? I feel like this might be a win. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen, right? We wanted everyone to follow the letter to the law. Therefore, there would be no mistrials. There would be no thrown out of the case. He wouldn't get bail. His constitutional rights have been violated. Now, mind you, he might be doing all kinds of stuff in the jail. Has he been reprimanded for those things? They're saying that he hasn't been. I'm just saying. I don't know. Wasn't there. But the phone calls, that I don't know how to really interpret, because everybody knows that the phone calls in jail are recorded. They tell you that at the beginning. This phone call will be recorded. You have received a phone call from your loved one. I'm not going to say, it doesn't say that, but you have received your phone call from so-and-so. Do you accept the charges? And I think it tells you that this phone calls are being monitored. I mean, you know that. So why you are calling on other people's phones, getting them all mucked up, using up their minutes, but they were listening to everybody's calls. That's how they found out that he was using other people's minutes to make, because he was using up all his minutes, I guess. So he was buying minutes from other people, putting probably nice pieces of change on their book so they can order their commissary. But yeah, this is what I didn't want to happen. We want Diddy to get a fair trial. Okay, so please don't come at me, talk about you sound like you're taking it for Diddy. I'm not. I'm not. I think that everybody deserves a fair trial. Everybody, innocent, guilty, whatever you deserve, everybody deserves due process. But what you're not allowing is for things to be revealed in a legal way. So, and it gives me the idea that the prosecution, and I don't want to think this, in my opinion though, I feel like the prosecution's case ain't as strong as they think that it is. Only because your victim one is Cassie, and most of her stuff is boyfriend-girlfriend relationship stuff. It's not what you all have charged him with. She happened just to be his girlfriend and got caught up in an abusive relationship, very abusive relationship. And they were looking for other things to support whatever Cassie has submitted or alleged in her allegations against Diddy. Just saying. Just saying. So, with that being said, tell me what you think. Leave your comments down below. We can talk about it. Even though y'all might think I'm I'm upholding Diddy and his craziness. No, I'm not. That's not what I wanted. But this is what I did not want. And as soon as they went and searched his cell and took the notes back to the filter team, which handed it over to the prosecution, that was it. I saw that coming. Just saying. Before you leave the building, may I ask that you like this video? Please like this video. This is a free way to support my channel. And it also tells YouTube that you were here and that it will throw me out into the algorithm for other people to find me as well. And with that being said, everyone be blessed. Peace.